Welcome back to the Working Audio Tools podcast, the home of all things audio, mixing and mastering related, the podcast where we constructively compare and critique mixers and interview professionals from the YouTube and audio communities. And this week, following on from the rest of Season 7, where our goal is to get a guest on every single episode, we have an interesting guest today who is a personal friend of both of us in the podcast, who has a very unique position career-wise, I think. He has some incredible credits. He's recorded Noel Gallagher, Elle Devine, Imelda May, Katie Tunstall, Natalie Imbruglia, Lower Than Atlantis, Bryan, Ferry, Richard Ashcroft, the Sugar Babes, and Frank Turner. And he's done Atmos mixes for artists such as the Swedish House Mafia and some other people I won't lie, don't recognise those names. We will pick his brains about these.
Jesus.
We'll pick his brains about these shortly. But I do know, on having had personal conversations, that this person has worked with Bob Clearmountain, and I'm sure we're going to have some questions for him about that. Can I introduce to you all Mr. Al Lawson?
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
So, Al, you're in a unique position in that you share a studio with a very high-profile mix engineer, and you do all of his Atmos work, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Jay Reynolds. I do all of the Atmos mixes of the stereo mixes he does, and then I do a lot of other mixes besides. I think I've basically just been an engineer for a long time, so I do a lot of different things for different people. Really, like I've met a lot of people along the way, and most of them want me to do one thing and not everything. So I've got people that I'm a recording engineer for. I've got artists that I'm a producer and a mixer and an engineer for. I've got people that just want me to do Atmos mixes. I've got people that just want me to do stereo mixes and no recording. I've got people that want me to go to their studio and plug stuff in and I built like 2 writing rooms for people in the last few weeks. So just spec the gear and go in and plug it all in and suggest ways that they can have like a successful space to work in and streamline things to be the most creative for them. So lots of different things for lots of different people, basically.
That sounds quite fun, actually. So do you feel at the moment, given the state of the industry, that being not a jack of all trades, but having fingers in many pies is the way forward to survive?
I feel like I'm a working class engineer. Like I make records or I work in music, but like I'm working, like I'm not a celebrity level person that like has a queue of hit records, that people are excited about. It's more like I do a good job for the people that want work doing, whatever that is. So like tomorrow and the next day I'm in La Mob in West London, which is like a vintage Neve studio. So I'm just recording a band for a producer. And then today I was doing Atmos mixes, stereo mixes this morning, and end of the week will be more stereo mixes, more Atmos mixes, fix up a writing room again on Monday, like loads of different things for loads of different people.
Variety is the spice of life, I feel.
Yeah, sorry, to answer your question better, like if you're looking to make this your living, I feel like you've got to go where the money is, or where if it's a job, it pays money. I like doing everything that I do. I think I'd be a bit depressed if I was just doing Atmos mixing. I'd definitely be depressed if I was just building studios or setting up studios for people. It all scratch different itches, different mental skills. Before 2020, before COVID, I was just a recording engineer. I was a freelance recording engineer. So I'd just go to studios by the day, by the week, by the month or whatever, and just point microphones at things and turn knobs and engineer for people. And then that kind of transitioned into more mix in, COVID, when it was possible to do sessions, and I did some, but it was also really possible for sessions to get cancelled because, you'd have everything booked and then someone would get COVID and then it's cancelled. So a lot of people that I was working with were moving away from doing that kind of thing and wanted me to do other things. And just started getting a different set of people phoning me, basically.
Yeah. Now, your studio situation's interesting because you have a room in a complex with Jay Reynolds, who has famously mixed Dua Lipa, and you have a nice studio complex in a place called Mix London in West London. What's your setup with him? Because if I'm right in understanding, you assist for him and you do his Atmos mixes, and then you obviously do your own stuff in your own time in the studio.
I suppose it is like assistant work. I've spent a long time like trying to streamline everything I do. Jay's just super busy. I kind of prep mixes for him. A mix takes me about 15 minutes to prep or something. So it's a nice reason for me to have a studio to work. Like, I've got a room of my own that I can do my own work in. And it's a reason for him to give it to me, essentially. So I'm always around to do stuff for him. Some of the stuff's a lot more complicated. Like, one thing that we get quite a lot is people forget to do a clean version. Like, people forget they need a clean version of a song that they want to be on the radio. And so a lot of the time they'll send you like the explicit version, and then they'll be like, oh, we need to send you the clean vocals for that. Or maybe they don't send the clean vocals and I record them. Like, someone will come in. Like, the Eldavine credit that I've got is she came in to just record some clean vocals for something. Like, but I'll do that, or they'll usually send like the most basic recording to replace the thing that was actually quite fancy in the mix in the delivery of the files. Like, there'll be reverb all over it and loads of compression and effects and stuff. And so it's a bit more of a skilled job, I guess, than an assistant. Like, I rebuild the sound of what was delivered before, but with the new vocals, essentially. So yeah, so I do a lot of stuff for Jay, and I do all of his Atmos mixes.
And is every artist coming through requiring an Atmos mix?
It's not every artist, but it's, I would say, probably about 70%. It's mainly like popular major label records. So,
and what kind of stems does Jay give you? Do the Atmos
make my own, mate. Make my own. Make whatever I want. I just get the Pro Tools. I've just got the Pro Tools session because he's just next door. So I've just got the Pro Tools session. So I just print whatever. I print whatever stems I want, and so I know like what I've taken off to get to the stems. I know why they're not why they might not be adding up as they need to, or I make it so that they are. So yeah, I mean, if I get files in from other people, then you have to just deal with whatever files you get.
And what kind of stems do you do? Will you do like all the drums, or will you actually have the separate elements, kick, snare, blah blah blah?
I do all the drums together. I feel like the more you split apart the stems, like, you've got more control, but also they are less controlled as far as like it's easier for them to get away from where they were in the mix. The more you split them apart. So I feel like if you glue all the drums together, I always want all my drums at the front. So like front, left and right. So if I glue them all together in one stem, that's fine. And anything that I'm thinking, they'll sit together, I just print them all as one stem. Whereas if I think, oh no, it'd be nice to separate that can be its own stem. I don't need to do all the guitars, but I can do all the rhythm guitars that are going to sit in the same, position in the room. I can do all of those together. I think about the mix while I'm doing the stems, basically.
Right. And see, in terms of the reverbs, I take it, are you having to print the reverbs and then you just use them as objects and place them where you feel works in the context of the stereo mix? Yeah.
Well, sometimes the stems come in wet. So Jay gets given files that have the reverb baked in. There's nothing, you can't there's no separate reverb, or he's not using plug-in reverbs to get that on some songs. Yeah, so those objects or those stems have got the reverb baked in, so they'll just be wherever the reverb is wherever the object is in the room, which I don't really find that's a problem. Sometimes they'll maybe send separate reverb stems, like they'll send the dry vocal with a wet reverb stem. They're easy to turn on as a stem, like they're easy to solo and print as a stem, just the reverbs. Whereas if you're using sends, it's all a bit fiddly because you've got to switch stuff to be pre-fade or send stuff to be on different buses, and it gets a bit fiddly. But if I can just solo some reverb tracks, I'll maybe print those for a vocal or something, and then maybe upmix those reverb stems to kind of fill the room a little bit more. But just depends on what kind of song it is, how busy I am, how much I think it'll bring to the the song. Is it are you going to appreciate having the the reverb be a bit more immersive and around you, or you're not really going to notice because it's quite dense or whatever, and there's plenty of other stuff going on.
And how are you feeling with the binaural side? Because obviously we had Paul Ashmore on last week, and he was talking about how he is very particular about the binaural and how he feels that he can get the binaural to work, and he sends that to clients as the stereo mix, because you'll, mix from scratch. Is binaural something that you do the same as him, where you're very particular about, which setting you use, or is it mostly just like get the speaker side of it sorted and then hopefully the translation kind of works well?
What I do is the headphone side is unbelievably important to me. All the speaker stuff's just fun, like having fun throwing stuff around the room and having a good experience. And then I put the headphones on and it just needs to sound exactly the same as the stereo. Tonally, balance-wise, space-wise. I just feel like any sound, like the binaural settings, one of them is right and the other three are wrong. If you've got like a really short room on something and you set it to far, you've like got a long reverb on top of a really short reverb, and it feels a bit lumpy or weird. And the same as if you have a really long ambient thing and you set it to near, like you've just dumped this like really short, close feeling on something that's really spacious. And sometimes you're like, all of them sound wrong, so I just need to turn it off. I fine tune the binaural setting for every single object and just make sure that it's like as transparent as possible, basically. Then you can just start balancing everything up and just section by section and bar by bar, like just making sure that, is that hi-hat half a dB too loud, too quiet? Like a lot of the time I'll find myself listening to a thing and going, oh, the hi-hat's a bit, like that stem is like a little bit darker in the Atmos mix. That's weird. Like, and then you turn it up half a dB and you're like, oh no, it's literally identical. Like it's those like half dB, 1 dB level changes I find are tonally significant in a way that I don't think they are on the speakers at all. Like maybe it's just my room. I can't tell if I turn up something half a dB and it's behind me. Like that half dB doesn't register for me like in the room. But on the headphones, I'm like, oh, that has changed. Like that is brighter now. I've turned it up a tiny, tiny bit.
So are you referencing off Jay's stereo mix? Is that the priority?
Always, yeah. Or whatever the master is. If someone else has mastered it, or if it's someone else's mix. Like I just did the new Fred Again album. Jay didn't mix that. So they're all masters and mixes from someone else, all stems from someone else. So I'm just referencing that. I think what would be really great for Atmos is if artists were involved and they were like, 100%. Oh, this is that sound, that should be over there. That should move around like this. Yep. And then they could stand behind that, as a piece of art to their fans and say, have a listen to the Atmos mix. I think this says some stuff that the stereo mix doesn't say. Like this has got more of me in it. And I think if you had that, the Atmos mix doesn't have to be the same as the stereo. It could be anything. If what they want makes it completely different, but they like it and it's their job to say yes, then great. Like that, more power to them. But if they're not in the room, I mean, the reason I got into this is because Jay did a mix for someone like in right at the beginning of Atmos, and they got an Atmos mix done. And Jay had been on the phone to this artist, like in LA, like, Zoom calls for hours over weeks and weeks of like tiny little tweaks and getting it all completely right. And then like some Atmos mixer in LA just sent something and was like, oh yeah, what do you reckon to this? And they were like, that doesn't sound anything like what we've spent so long crafting. If you just throw away all of that hard work, like, and just make out like it doesn't matter how things are balanced or where things are placed, or I'm not into that. So yeah, so then the reason we got into Atmos mixing was because it was like, we shouldn't let that happen. Like we should control it and make it exactly right, basically.
I almost feel like Atmos should be an extension of the stereo and an extra piece of art, almost like, the A side is the stereo mix that goes on the radio and the B side is the creative, artistic director's cut.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like a dub mix back in the day or whatever, or like it's another version of it. Like I think that would be really cool. Like I think,
I agree.
But are you seeing that? Are you seeing many artists actually get involved in the process, or is it all Apple label
I mean, I'm personally not seeing any artist involvement at all. Had one artist listen to one of, I mean, I said, like, I'm a pretty conservative Atmos mixer. I had one artist listen. I don't think they'd ever heard any other mixes. And someone played them my mix and they were like, whoa, this is wild. Like, can we calm this down? And I was like, really? Like, I don't really do the weird stuff. Like, I feel like this is a pretty tasteful, like...
Not into the kinky Atmos.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Plain vanilla Atmos, always. Right. Socks on Atmos.
Average
like,
Atmos.
Socks on Atmos.
Socks on, lights off.
Like, full on, yeah, just safe Atmos.
Right.
Practice safe Atmos is where I'm
Not
at.
telling them where you live. Okay.
Yeah, so my mix was so I revisited it, like really scaled it even more. Like, it was the most boring Atmos mix I've ever done. But then, so that came out as the single, but then the album, someone else did the album, and then there's more to it now, like on the album version. So I guess they had a little bit of a listen or weren't part of the decision-making process.
Yeah. Do you think that hesitance from the artist there was familiarity or lack of familiarity with the concept?
Yeah, it might well have been. I don't know. Unfortunately, I wasn't able. They didn't come into the studio, and I wasn't able to play them it because I would have played them some other stuff first and kind of got them or made sure that they had a handle on what Atmos mixes like sound like. What's everyone doing? You know? Yeah, that was just it's just one song. It's not.
What I find interesting is that obviously, if you imagine like Jay's stereo mix would be, if you're on Spotify, which so many people are, that's going to be like all they're going to get. But, many people are on Apple AirPods. It's like arguably, one of the biggest selling in the world now. And, many people are on Apple Music. So for many people, they will be listening to your mix more than and they won't even realize it. And I suppose
totally.
Is that kind of the art for you, which is why you've got to be so respectful to the stereo, knowing that there might be a chance, depending on, the technology that they're listening on, that they're going to be listening to your mix and not Jay's mix. And the two of them have to coincide in the same world so the artist's vision translates everywhere. Yeah.
That's the whole reason I'm doing the mixes for Jay. Like, it needs to be the same mix. Like, when someone puts the headphones on, someone goes, oh, Jay mixed that. And then they listen to the Atmos version that's completely weird. And they're like, oh, that's maybe not a good mix. And maybe he's not good at mixing.
I know what you mean.
So it's just got to be the same. It's got to be the same mix. Yeah. Like, the way I think of it is, if you think of like the stems as being layers in front, like all stacked up in the stereo, like I'm kind of pulling them out into the room and making sure that they're adjusted to kind of feel exactly the same. It's not about like, oh, I've got all these toys and I can spin stuff around the room and I can, do all of these fancy things and we can make it sound like it's far away and I can throw loads of sub on it, put it through the, LFE and stuff like that. Like, there are little subtle, unavoidable tonal changes because it is it is a different mix. I've taken different files to the ones that Jay started with or whoever mixed it. I've taken different files. I've done different stuff to them. Like, I've put binaural, there's binaural space on and data on those stems. Like, it is different. So it will sound slightly different, but it needs to still very much feel like it's the same song, it's the same mix, it's got the same qualities, it's got the same values. Like, so
really binaural is kind of the bread and the butter, really, because that's most 98% of listeners are going to be listening to the binaural.
I mean, I just find the speakers so much more forgiving.
Yeah,
like the speaker, when everything's just blasting out the speakers around you, like, that's a good time, and stuff's above your head and it's a real physical experience. But when you get it on the headphones, like, you're stripping away some of that.
Yeah, totally.
I don't get a lot of that experience, that effect. Things on their own, like, if I get one thing and I move it, I'm like, oh yeah, it is behind me and it is above me. But when you get lots of different things in lots of different places playing at the same time, like, it sounds quite stereo.
So I always feel with Atmos that those mixes lack the punch of a stereo mix. Paul played me a bunch of stuff.
Not mine, mate.
Right.
He didn't send you my playlist, mate. Exactly the same promise. Exactly the same.
All right,
Punchy as
that's
hell.
good to know. So it's just a technique thing.
It's difficult. It's difficult. As when you listen, unfortunately, when you listen to it on Apple Spatial, they throw away the settings that I've lovingly chosen, and they apply their own settings essentially to strip it down to like the basic concept. Like the Apple Spatial version, if you're listening on headphones, I think is not as kind of accurate as the one that I've done, because it's taken some of the control that I've put into it away.
I didn't know that.
Basically.
I thought the data that you had like in your ADM files would be in your binaural data. That would be exactly what Apple Music play, but they don't do that. They actually like do kind of their own thing.
So
right?
I think it's complicated. If we're going to get down the rabbit hole, it's complicated. Yeah. I think no one's 100% sure about this.
Okay.
But definitely in one of the universal guidelines, they suggested that when you listen on Apple Music with the Apple headphones, like the AirPods Pro or Pro Max, or I think there's some Beats headphones that are compatible with that, like that have head tracking, basically, they get the full Apple Spatial experience. Like they're doing the decode. They've taken the ADM essentially and are like decoding it in their special way with all of their own. In order to get the head tracking working, they've had to apply their own room for the head to move around in. Essentially, like that. That's essentially my understanding of it.
Yeah.
If you listen, according to Universal a few years ago, if you listen on Apple Music on non-Apple headphones, like if you use wired headphones, but you're streaming it through your iPhone or whatever, then I think you get the actual mix with the binaural settings, or you get a third option that I don't know. Yeah, but it's different. A lot of people are having different listening experiences to the same file, which is a possible negative to Atmos in general. Is that because it's so adaptable, it's adapting to different people's things, and you can't predict what one person's setup's going to be, or like you've never heard it in 6.0 or whatever, like where they've just turned off one of the, where there's, I don't know if that's a thing, but you can't control how people are going to listen to it. So it's possible that in one wild set of circumstances, it'll sound different to how you've heard it.
The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. Don't forget, you can't just upload your songs to Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, or Tidal. You have to go through a music distribution service. There are many out there, but DistroKid is the one that Paul and myself use. They don't take any of your royalties. You keep 100% of the streaming revenue that you earn. For just $1.92 a month or $22.99 a year, you can upload unlimited songs. Your lyrics can be found in Google and other places. You get the blue Spotify verified checkmark, and you can create royalty splits between yourselves and fellow contributors. You also get access to the new DistroKid iPhone app for editing and uploading songs and accessing your statistics on the move. There are plenty of other tools available on DistroKid. We'll go through those in another section. So as a man with fingers in many pies across many different levels and areas of the industry, what are your thoughts on the state of the industry at the moment, and where do you think it's going with AI?
Wow. Jesus.
What a question, Ed.
Mate, I'm a jack of all trades, mate. I haven't got... the AI thing, I don't know, like... I feel like I saw a headline. I didn't read the article, I'll admit, but I saw a headline that was just like, we cannot, like AI cannot exist. Someone's defense of AI was, we have to use copyrighted material or we just can't, it just doesn't work. We need to have materials that have already been created to essentially steal from to create.
AI is just plagiarism, isn't it?
It's just plagiarism. Yeah. And they were just like, that's the way it works. Like, we can't have AI if we don't nick stuff, as if that was like a justification for being able to do that.
infringe copyrights.
I think possibly. I mean, I would love AI getting a bit more helpful. I would think, like if AI can listen to, if you can point AI to a job in your song or whatever. I don't want them to do the mix for me, but if I'm like,
I know what you mean.
Oh, every time this weird kind of sound happens or this resonance, like, can you just like listen to that in a bit more of an intelligent way than just me setting a... Maybe it's Sooth too. Maybe it's Sooth too, like, I don't know, like...
If you were editing, I can imagine if you said, right, can you crossfade all of these files to an eighth note, for example, at the start and the end, and Pro Tools did that automatically, that would be brilliant.
Yeah. Or like when I beat Detective... Sorry, Paul, this is a Pro Tools conversation.
I'll just leave. I'll just fucking leave now.
But like you beat Detective some drums and you chop them up and then... Not your drums, Ed. I'm sure you would never have been...
Never quantized myself.
Never quantized, no. Why would you? They're already there.
They don't play anymore.
They're already there. But, I often find myself going through and you got to move, drag regions to get them out of the way of, get the slices out of the way of like a bit of the hit or whatever. And like, if it could just go through that and goes, oh, I know what drums are, I know what that hit is, I'll just move all, I'll just do all of this. And it can just, you can press the button and it can kind of know a bit more rather than like, oh, this has reached the threshold of the trigger gate that I've set, or, I don't know how this fucking stuff works. I just turn knobs and see what happens. Like,
I'd love Isotope to be able to do that, because I know that when I looked into John Haynes, who is Serban's assistant, he was talking a lot about how when they receive vocals, normally they all go through RX first. And I think, I don't know if they'll use the deplosive or mouth declick or fucking, denoise or whatever.
Presumably all of those things, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that would, just to be able to actually for you to teach it to know what you do and get it to work in a way where you can just click it and that job's done. Because even when I do this podcast, I use RX on everybody's vocals, and it is a bit of a laborious thing. It's very simple because it saves the last things that I've done, but it's still a ball ache, and it's still a time where if you could just write a script and go click, and you could get it can import the vocals, and it could be vocals, because again, you got a verse, chorus, bridge, and all the doubles and all the backing. All of that could do it in a winner. That would, that's where AI could come in really handy for people.
But can't you do all the files in a one anyway? You just have to put it on every single channel, bounce it, duplicate each channel, get rid of the plugin.
I don't know.
Anyway, technicality, sure. But I mean, so something like Bounce Butler, but an AI Bounce Butler, so that you can drag in a stem into Pro Tools, and it says, "Do you want to process this through vocal processing?" And it does all those automatically for you, puts it in the session, boom, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be big.
I mean, Bounce Butler's a great example of that. Like, if instead of me having to, I proudly say I'm the biggest Bounce Butler user worldwide. I've bounced more
Chris
bounces
will be happy to hear that.
than, well, Chris told me.
Right.
I was like, mate, is there a league? How many, I feel like I'm using it quite a lot. Like, I'd be interested to know if anyone else is using it that much. And he was like, oh, let me just have a look. It actually keeps track of all the bounces. He was like,
that doesn't surprise me with Chris.
He was like, you are way in the lead. Wow. of bounces. Like, don't worry about this. So yeah, but if instead of me having to go, oh, okay, I've soloed the drums, if AI can just go, oh, I know what the drum tracks are, mate. Like, what do you want? Your normal set of stems? Do you want, like I know what, I can work out that all of these things are different, and I'll group them together and I'll print all the stems, and like, I just know that.
Or AI session prep. Like, okay, this is clearly a bass track. I know this needs to go to that bus, and
it can just know things.
Oh, that'd be brilliant.
Or maybe, like Microsoft Office. I don't know if it still has it, but like Microsoft Office had the paperclip. It's like, I think you're writing a document.
I remember the
are you doing a spreadsheet? Like,
wasn't that on like Microsoft Vista for 1 year?
Yeah, maybe. But what if there was a little AI thing that was like, oh, I think you're prepping a session here. Do you just want me to do it? Like, I've been watching you do it for months. Like, I think I've got a good handle on it. Do you want to see, or do you want a couple of options? It preps it, and then you go.
I'm gonna have a word with Chris about this.
However, let's be very careful here, because as much as we're like, yeah, that would really work for us.
Oh, I know.
That would do a lot of people, many assistants out of jobs. And that is maybe the thing that people are a bit scared of. Like for us, who like, again, for me and Ed, who do all of the work ourselves, we're like, yeah, 100%, let's get on that train. But, when you do see credits, there is, assistant engineer, and there is like, editor, that. And I suppose when we think about that, we are sitting there going, with things like Bounce Butler and the way it could go, there is a chance, many people could probably lose their jobs. And that is the scary thing, that for us it works. But there are people that do that job now.
The thing is, auto-tune doesn't put singers out of jobs, does it?
It gives them jobs, if anything. That's it's a bad thing.
No,
I think there are more singers because of auto-tune than less.
You're welcome.
But yeah, the thing I think about, be it like the AI doing assistants out of work, like Bounce Butler, like doing an assistant out of work, like just get them some better stuff to do. Like no one,
it's doing them out of jobs they didn't want to do anyway.
It's not a good use of your time. It's not a good use of anyone's time. Just you're not learning anything. Like
that's
soloing the drums and just sitting there while it prints and then going, oh, what was I doing? Or like, oh yeah, no, did I put guitar 1 in the guitar's stem, or does that need to go on its own? Like I've forgotten now. What did I, or then you go back at the end, you go, oh shit, I got to the end of the song and actually I left out that backing. But like people
or I left
don't
the
want to
vocal
be
reverb on everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do you know what I mean?
Again.
Like, you just don't want to. Like, people don't need to be doing that. Find them something better to do. Like, get them doing something more useful to you. Supersede that. Like that. Printing stems is a skill that is mastered very quickly. I think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been, an engineer for a long time, but I just think find all the drums and press solo on them, then press record. Like it's pretty basic.
Yeah.
So I think you could get into some much more advanced work a lot quicker if you're not using up your time with that, basically.
No, I agree. And I think that, what I think is very important that I love about this podcast, that we do tend to go into quite a lot when we have, professionals on the podcast, is the importance of workflow. Because, guys like Al and, many of the, engineers that we've had on this podcast, it is all about workflow. Like, again, Paul Ashmore last week, he was like, there's times you can have a film and it's like, I've got hundreds of tracks, I need them to be done now. And I take it, you'll be the same, Al, when something comes in, it's like, right, this is the deadline, this is the timescale, right, it's on your desk, right, you need to do this now. You know what I mean? I can't have it in 2 days, I need to have it tomorrow. Is that kind of the same as many people we speak to, where the deadlines could just be like, right, okay, I need it tomorrow, and you're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, I did an Atmos album like a couple of weeks ago, and they were still sending. I didn't have all the files on Friday. And then I was kind of, I'd done a few songs and I was getting the files in, getting them all prepped and everything. And then the A&R person emailed me and was like, oh, how are you getting on with the album? Like, we're hoping to deliver it on Monday morning. And I was like, I don't even have all the files. Like, I don't even have all of the songs. Like, mental. I don't like, I'll try, assuming I get them, like, I'll try really, really hard to get you them. But like a whole album in 2 days, well, less than 2 days, because I don't have all of the files for all the things, like, is a big ask. But yeah, I just did it because you just, you got to do it. No one else is doing it. So yeah, and that's not ideal. It's an unregulated industry.
Yeah, totally.
And there are benefits to that, and there are caveats to that. So, you take your chances.
Yeah, we've touched on that in a few episodes now about where the boundaries are and drawing the line with this immediacy that the industry seems to require, that I will say again, every musician and engineer has facilitated by tolerating and accepting those terms and conditions. I had a quote last year that blew my mind that said, be careful what you tolerate, because you're teaching people how to treat you.
Yeah,
and
completely.
Everyone accepting being told, do an album in 24 hours. Okay, that's the industry standard. Everyone then expects it, and it's It's like you go into the property world or finance. They're putting down at 5. There's none of this. Oh, can you get this done like by 7 p.m. tonight? No, mate. I've been in the pub for 2 hours and I'm off for the weekend. Be done Monday morning. Deal with it. Only in this industry, I swear. I'd love to hear from comments from people, other industries where the demand, maybe film and television. I when I do conferences and live sound stuff, like I did the Married at First Sight launch on Tuesday this week. And
Sweet.
That was interesting. I get an insight into these other industries where there are a lot of demands of a different nature. But in terms of, those guys, except on an event, Monday to Friday, they're in the office and then they put the work down.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of competition for...
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to think of it as competition necessarily, but like there's a lot of people that are capable of doing your job.
Yep.
Like that's it.
But that's in any industry though. That's not exclusive to us. It's just we've created a culture where the demand is
very
immediacy.
freelance said. That's the difference. So think about audio is very freelance. Like if you think about like the jobs I had, you were employed, salaried. You were like, right, that was it, Monday to Friday. Where again in the audio industry, it is. I was listening to the thing I sent you today with Manny Marikin, and he was talking about Stronger, and it was so funny because Kanye had got him to do all of these changes, and he was like, but what Manny didn't know that had already been sent to like 12 other mixers.
I saw that, yeah.
And he was like, if I would have known it had already been sent to 12 other mixers, I wouldn't be slaving away at all this stuff. But again, it shows you that like this is Manny, and it was sent to 12 other fucking mixers. It is that competitive, and it is so freelance that, that's what everybody's telling us, Ed, is that as brutal as it is, there are, as Al says, there are tons of people out there that can do your job to as high a level or better, subjective, but that's the way of it. Either you get the work or you don't. You either put your name in the hat or you don't, and you don't get the work.
And with that, I know often I have a bit of a negative spin on that, as that's been a problem, but actually there's opportunity there. So whereby someone who can't do a mix, it's going to go to someone else and then someone else, and everyone will have a list. And eventually, if you go if someone goes far enough down a list, they'll get to me and Paul.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of the list.
Mate,
right at the bottom.
I'll have already done it. Well, just the phone call before you is me, and I'll have just gone, it's fine. Yeah, I'll get it done by 1. What, are you going to call Paul? No, it's fine. I'll do it.
No, it's fine. I've got it.
I'll do it. Yeah, it's fine, mate. It's fine. Way at the bottom will be me, and I'll... Sorry, I dissed you too hard. I think, I've actually thought a lot of the time, not necessarily about like compromising on deadlines and destroying your family life or whatever, but I've definitely found success in tolerating difficult people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I've retained work. Like I work with all kinds of people all the time, and a lot of them are incredibly pleasant people that I really like and would help in any way I can because they're nice. And some people are not very nice. They're not very helpful. Are you finding
success tolerating this podcast?
I totally. This is exactly it. Like, you would think that I like you. Like, this is what I mean. I'm professional. I'm a professional, mate. You don't know what I think. You just think, oh, we're having a great time. He's talking to the microphone. Okay, cool. We're doing the podcast. You don't know what I think. But I think, but there'll be people that are like, God, I hate Ed and Paul so much. They're not getting the podcast calls, are they? They're not getting them. I mean, I think I've extended this metaphor in a bit of an unpleasant direction, but I think that in terms of if you're looking to start a career, if you can manage to tolerate some more difficult people that other people might pass over, or you might get recommended. I mean, I've been recommended to people because they're like, I just can't work with this person anymore. Like, if you want it, it's yours. Like, and if you're having a quiet week or a quiet month or whatever, or if you just like, actually, I think I'll get on with them. Like, I'm open-minded about it. Like, let's find out. So that can be not a foot in the door, but you can succeed where other people fail.
It can be
by just not saying, fuck off, I'm not working with you ever again. Like, if you just bite your tongue and just get on with the work, if you're happy to do the work rather than like try and be friends with people, then that's a way that I think you can get on. That's like tangential to, bending over backwards in unreasonable timeframes or whatever. Like you don't have to. It's not necessarily about compromising your beliefs, but if other people are like, I just don't like the way they just tell me to do that thing without saying please, or like they're not very friendly. Like some people are like, don't, I'm not bothered about that. Like I'm just there to do the job.
Yeah, I think that's where doing live sound for me has trained me to be very fluid and flexible with that, because I've dealt with every character, from people that I've had to threaten to sue to, people who are snappy and entitled and everyone in between. So if someone speaks to me in a certain way, I think also being northern and just typically being quite blunt and, if someone's snappy or short with me or doesn't say please and thank you, it doesn't really faze me. There's another gentleman I've worked with he's a hell of a character. He's must be 70 or something. Absolute character. He's got some incredible stories. And he's just the most un-PC guy, like, but he's funny with it. But it's like, oh, you can't say that. And it's like, I'm not so kind of woke, as it were, that I'm going to get offended and, not work with him. It's just like, okay, that's what he is. I'll take it for what he is. That doesn't mean I buy into what he says, but it's just, that's who he is, but I can still work with him.
He doesn't need to get turned away from a hotel room booking because he's got some odd beliefs. Like it's business. This is what I mean. Like it's business and it's a job. If you are trying to do a job of engineering or, whatever aspect of audio you want to do, like there's an element of you just need to provide the service that people want to pay you to do. I think it's good to have a political or a moral awareness of things. And there are brands or people that I'm not fond of that I don't need to go out of my way to support them, so I don't.
That's a good way of putting it.
But when it comes to working with people, if you can just get on with the job bit of it and you can do a good job, whatever that person is like, if they could say to someone else, oh yeah, Ed does a good job, Paul does a good job, like doing what I need him to do, like that's what you want. Like, and I think that can get you a little bit of the way there.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing for people to understand, is that many, many episodes that we've done with so many guests, I've talked about the personable side of audio and how, even if it's just like globally and online, even the way that you reply to them in a message and what you say to them and, how you make them feel is a massive, massive, massive part of, getting that kind of cycle. I always feel that because I was in retail and sales for like 5 years and stuff, that was my job. Day to day, you get people that'd be like, okay, you're not my cup of tea, but my job is to like sell you tiles, sell you carpets, vinyl, whatever. That was my job. And in the exact same tone, that my job was to make sure that regardless of, what you thought of me as a person, in terms of my job, you were always like, he's good at his job. What I mean? And that's the thing. Again, be polite, be as courteous, work. And I think that's for people that don't have, I think retail experience is really good for people that have never been in audio before. Just getting used to the general public and being used to kind of, cutting your mouth and be like, okay, right, maybe watch my P's and my Q's here. Which again, for me, many people would be shocked that I was in retail for so long and it was difficult. But with me being autistic, I always found that I would mirror people. So like, if people were very sweary around me, I would normally find it start like, letting a few of the words loose. If somebody was very, very, very tight, very maybe upper class, I would try and adapt and mirror to like the way that they are. And I think that's sometimes something that many people forget, is that, they're in the bedroom, and they're trying, I'm going to go out and do mixing and stuff. And then all of a sudden they do a mix for somebody and they never get word back. And they think it's because they did a shit mix. When actually it was just because, as we said earlier, there are so many people out there that genuinely it can come down to something as, personality and how you make them feel. The quality of your work's good, but I just don't particularly feel that I got a good vibe working with you. It's a very, very, very important thing.
this is what I mean. It's an unregulated industry.
Totally.
Like, I mean, when I was like an assistant at a studio, I remember the number of times you'd get, you'd phone the engineer for the session. They're coming in to record a band or record drums or something, and you'd phone the engineer and you'd be like, oh, before, so you're coming in, before you get here, do you want to send a list of microphones or whatever, I can start getting them out. And they're like, yeah, just set up what you normally set up. Oh, okay. So like, what, like this? Like, yeah. And then you get there and I'm like, okay, so I've just got the mics kind of roughly out there. Oh yeah. Just put them wherever you normally put them. And then, and I'm like, okay, and what mic pre's do you want to plug them into? Like, oh, just do whatever you normally do, plug them into wherever you normally plug them in. And then you're like, okay, right. So I'll plug them in and they're like, yeah, so just kind of get them coming up the desk and, just kind of set all the headphones and everything. And yeah, I normally use Logic actually. So if you could run the Pro Tools, that'd be great. And then you're just like, what are you doing here? Like what part of this what part of this process are you doing? But they have somehow ingratiated themselves into a situation, like they've convinced someone that they're an engineer and that they're, capable of doing that. Oh, yeah, let's go to the studio. Like, I'll engineer it. Yeah, don't worry about it. Like, but there's something about that person that keeps them around. They've got a thing somewhere they're all right to have on the session. Like the number of times I worked with engineers and producers that were not necessarily like the most technical or switched on kind of person about a certain thing maybe, and you're sat and as an assistant it's really easy to just be sitting there going, God, you lot don't even know anything about all of this stuff. But it's like you've got nothing else to think about, so you can think about all of the aspects.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But but ultimately they're probably, if they like the same football, or they both like football, or they both like smoking weed, so we just hang around and make records together and we have a good time, and like no one's going to stop us doing that. Like it's not a meritocracy. Like it's not about I've got I've ticked all the boxes, so now I get to do all the work. You're just relying on someone thinking you're all right to, thinking you're trustworthy or pleasant, or, it's more relationship based than you would like it to be sometimes.
The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. For a little bit more, $39.99 a month, you can have 2 artists on your roster, which includes everything just mentioned. Additionally, synced lyrics in Apple Music, further streaming analytics statistics. You can create a customizable record name. Mine, for example, is Ed Thorne Rhythm and Records. And you can customize release dates, pre-order dates, iTunes pricing, and again, much more. Now, if you're an artist manager or a record label, the Ultimate Bundle gives you up to 100 artists for just $89.99 a year. And you get 1 terabyte of instant file sharing, which is useful, but also contact information for thousands of playlist curators on Spotify. This is really useful so you can pitch your artist music to playlist curators around the world. Only available in the Ultimate Bundle from DistroKid.
And in regards to the recording side, because we've not really touched on that, are you somebody that has, a firm belief, on like the pre's really do make a big difference and, getting really expensive mics? Or are you somebody that's kind of more of an approach where, I can work with decent mics, it's just all about, the placement and, and the performance? Or are you somebody that believes in everything? Because, you do speak to certain people and it's like, it's got to be 1073 into, a CL1B. It's got to be an API preamp. It's got to be a Neumann U47. How do you kind of fall in that kind of category when it comes to the recording side?
I think the way I think about it, everything matters and nothing matters. Like, gear is so good. I love gear so much. I love vintage Neves and APIs and some weird German mic pre from wherever, and good quality mics, and some mad mic with a compressor in it that someone built, and I get excited about gear so much. And if it's there to be used, then let's do it. Like, let's plug it in. Let's bake in all the good sounds. Like, let's squeeze every drop out of everything that you've got to hand. And let's, and it's fun to do that. And if you've got a bit of time to check a couple of things or whatever, like that's brilliant. If you can A/B 2 compressors, or you go, oh, actually, let's move that thing, or let's not use that, or let's try a different approach at that. Great. I'm all for it. Like, gear is great. But if you haven't got it, just don't worry about it. Like, you just got to use whatever there is. It's funny because I realized recently that, like, relatively recently, that if I was recording drums, like, if I didn't have I'd always use a FET 47 on the outside kick. And if I didn't have one, I just wouldn't do an outside kick mic. Like, I just never, it just was not, it was this blank in my mind where I was like, oh, there's not a FET 47. Like, it's fine. I just won't bother using any other microphone. I'll just do an inside kick, or like, I'll put a microphone slightly out, and I'll try and get a balance of both. Like, but normally, apart from that, I'm normally like, oh, we'll just use whatever, or like, you set up all the stuff that you like, and then there's one weird microphone that you weren't, that you've never used before, and maybe it's the worst thing you've ever done, or maybe it's the best. Or I think it all matters. Like, it's good to have good quality stuff. Like, if you have good quality gear, you can make good quality recordings, and there's weight to having transformers in the signal path, and and having super fast op amps makes stuff punchy, as opposed to not having those, or having no transformers and having it be super clean is a thing. Like, I don't think there's no point saying that a 1073 doesn't sound different to the built-in mic pre on an interface. Like,
yeah, totally.
That's silly to say that. But to say that we couldn't do something because we didn't have the other thing, or like, oh, well, there's no point in doing this because we haven't got whatever. Like, you got to try and make the best of it. Like, I was mainly like a recording engineer until relatively recently. And so I feel like I'm a confident engineer. I can just go to any studio. Like, I'm not really a person with like a lot of numbers in my mind about like frequencies and, things. Like, I set something up and I go, what does that sound like? I have an idea, or I've done something a lot of times. So I start there. And then if it doesn't sound like what I want it to sound like, then you either turn a knob, or you go and move the mic, or you swap out the mic, or you go, actually, the figure of 8 mic's really not working with that like other noise that's happening really far away. It's like, we need something different. Just listen to it and change, or be happy.
I think what you've actually touched on there, that I think I've never actually kind of thought upon till now, is that many people have this thing about gear where it's like, I always use this, and people go, it's because it's expensive and because it sounds better. When actually a really good thing that I think that you've kind of picked up with the U47 is that a lot of the times it is about consistency because of workflow, because time is money. You don't have the time to be, right, okay, let's like do 15 different mics on the kick. It's like, no, get the kick and let's get the recording done. So from a workflow element, you've got that consistency. So many people will say go into a CL1B because they know that that's, a consistent sound, and they'll get a kind of consistent results. So is there anything else in recording that you've got, like the U47, the kind of the go-tos that you find that, in most cases that will work, and that you do find yourself kind of going into those set patterns? Is there anything else?
Yeah, maybe I don't know if I do anything. I don't know if I do anything really different, like anything super different. All the classics. Like, I quite like an RE20 on the kick. I like a FET 47 on the outside kick. If you've, but you can do a Bayer M88 or a D112 or a D12 or a D30 or a D36, D20. I mean, they're all the same mic basically, but there's certain mics that like lean into certain sounds. Like, if you're doing a more modern like rock or metal thing, then like a kick drum mic that has a bit more of a sculpted sound to it just maybe gets you a little bit closer. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about like, do you like microphones that do that kind of like lean in a particular direction? And I was just thinking like, but all microphones are that.
They've all got a sound.
Like, you don't, if you're doing a lead vocal, like, if you choose to use a 58 or a 57 or something, like that's going to sound different. If you don't want it to sound like that, you shouldn't use that microphone.
Yeah,
like
totally.
if you've got an 87 or a 67 for, if you've got something, you have one mic and you like the sound of that, and that's going to be don't use a different mic. Like if it's going to lean you away from that, like if you're trying to mic up a kick drum with like a KM84 small diaphragm condenser or something, you're going, not very chunky, not very deep. And, like you're always picking microphones that are tailored to the thing that you're recording.
Totally.
Like, and some of them have like gone a little bit deeper on refining, getting you a little bit closer without more fiddling on your part, basically.
How are you? Are you a 57? Are you a 57 guy, or are you somebody that's like, oh my God, the 57 has just been overdone to death? Or do you genuinely find it to be the workhorse?
But this is what drives me mad. Like a 57 is like, this is what I mean. Everything's got a sound.
Yeah.
If in your mind, whether deliberately or kind of much more subconsciously, if in your mind, all the records you love have a 57 on the snare or on the guitar cab or whatever, like if you love distorted guitars that were recorded with a 57, if you then go, oh no, 57's a shit, mate. Like you've got to use something else. Like, well, you're fighting.
Yeah, totally.
The thing that the 57 is part of some sounds. I like an RE20 on a snare. Anyone ever? Many people doing that? Some people are maybe, but like an RE20 on a snare or a 441 or something, like you can do loads of different things. But if you're putting up the RE20 going, hasn't quite got that crack. I don't know why there is. I just wish we could get a bit more crack out of it. You're like, well, if you go, oh, we're gonna do this Hendrix style record, right? But I fucking hate Strats, so we're not using a Strat. No Strats.
No Marshall. No Strat.
Strats are bullshit. Like Les Pauls are the best guitar ever. We'll do it, but it's like you've got to use the thing that gets the thing that does the thing. Yeah. And if you're like deliberately not using something, then you're either definitely trying to go away from that. You're like, no, I don't like Strats. It needs to be a big fat sound all the time. Great, cool. If you hate 57s because there's something about their response that you find objectionable in every circumstance, and you're never chasing classic sounds that use those things, then fine, great. Yeah, like you do something else. Like but yeah, I don't have a problem with any microphone really. I don't really have a problem with anything. Like I think everything's good on something. It's good for something. Like it can't be good for everything.
It's the context of that mic that is the most important. As you said, if it's a 57, you know how it's going to sound on a snare. You know how it's going to sound on a guitar cab.
Yeah.
And the same with an MD421 on toms. It's like, and I think that's probably something that many people don't talk about, something that you'll have a lot of experience in, is that over the years, you've almost got this kind of palette of sounds where if you're kind of chasing a tone or you want something to sound a certain way, you've got that kind of encyclopedia of knowledge where you can go, what have you got in the mic locker? That. Let's try that. I mean, that's something that many people don't talk about. Yeah.
Like I was working with a producer, and he was like, oh, I want to go out. We need that like Joe. I can't remember the title of there's a Joe Cocker song that was sampled. The piano was sampled for California Love by Tupac. And he was like, that's the piano sound we need. And I was like, it's a pair of 57s. Like pair of 57s on that upright piano is going to just be straight there. Like this is not like, oh no, we get the posh mics and then we EQ them and we make them a little bit bitier and we take a little bit of the bottom out. It's like, and he was like, what have you got on the piano? And I was like, oh, a pair of 57s. Like, it's going to be fine. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, just have a listen. And then he listened. He was like, that's exactly it. That's exactly the thing. Like, yeah, you've got an idea or an experience of what things sound like and how you can get places. And the more you do, the more work you do, like the easier that is, I guess. And
do you find that something that the best kind of recording engineers have is that experience, that plethora of, it's almost like a canvas of sounds that you build up over an encyclopedia of sounds that you have. Palette. I mean, how long did it take you to kind of get to that point where, like, like you said in that session, you just knew, right, 257s, bang. How long did it take you to kind of get to that? If you were to put an average, like...
There's creative people. Well, I mean, I think there's creative people and there's technical people. I think there are some wonderfully creative people. Like there's some mad engineers who are like not necessarily on all of their frequencies and their whatevers. And they're like, I reckon you plug this into this and they, turn a few things, or they, shove it through a box or a compressor or I've plugged things in backwards backwards to the normal way, and they can react to whatever comes out in a very exciting way that's unusual and doesn't rely on knowing what all the rules are. And whereas I think I'm more of a technical person, where I'm like, I have a bank of, I did this and this happened and I remember that. So I can do that again, or I can start there. And then I also know that this thing works like this, so I can change it in this way, which is not necessarily, like I find sometimes when you work with artists, I remember one time this artist that I used to engineer for a lot, she'd just got this analog synth in, and analog synths, you got to tune them. Like they're not in tune all the time. And she just got this thing, and we were trying to record it into this track, and she was so fucking excited. She turned all the knobs, and she was like getting these cool sounds. And I was like, "Can we just tune it? Can we just tune it? Can we just tune? Can we just do the? Can we just? I just want to." She was like, "Yeah, no, I'm really." And I was like, "Can we just tune it? Like, if we just spend 5 seconds just tuning it, then everything you do will be great." And she was like, "I haven't got fucking any part of my brain that is thinking the technical, like, this is what I should do. I'm just hearing something and I'm getting really excited about it and I'm adapting to what I'm hearing." Whereas boring Al is like Captain Safety, as my wife calls me, is like, if it's not in tune when we've finished, you're not going to like it, or it's going to be difficult to like get it into the song because it's not going to be in tune, and these are the things that you need to do. Like,
yeah.
So I think there's two different personality types, or two different ways of approaching engineering or, music in general, a lot of things. But I feel like I'm definitely more like, I know I kind of, not that you can't break the rules, like, you can over compress things and you can distort things, like, but I'm kind of like, I'm doing that because I know that that's how you can do that. And like, I know that I'm distorting that thing because I've turned up the gain here and I've turned down the gain there, rather than like, oh, I just plugged these things in and then the sound came out and it was distorted and I liked that. So, like, I just, I feel like I know what stuff does. That's the kind of approach that's the only approach I can take, basically.
No, I agree, because I think, something that it's always stuck with me is that somebody said a quote. I don't know if it was Quincy Jones himself, but what I always remember is that for every Quincy Jones, there is a Bruce Swedian. And it's that creative type and that person that knows how to get that sound that creative type says. And that was something that Manny was talking about in the interview I sent to Ed today, where he was just like, Kanye's not technical in the slightest. But he surrounds himself with people I've got a kick sound, you'll go to Timbaland and go, right, get me that kick sound. And that's something that I think is very important for people to remember, is that when people say, oh, again, they'll maybe think about Dan Worrell types and like me, and, it'd be like, oh, very technical. I'm like, no, we do need the technical, because how do you get that without having somebody technical that knows how to get it? And it's having that balance that's so important. And I think people need to remember that, creative is important. It's an art form. But, as engineers, that's how I see our jobs, Al, is that we are paid to be technical. You know what I mean? Yeah, we are always paid to kind of keep the art kind of front and center, but there is a technical aspect to this job. And it's very, very important to do your due diligence and experiment and research and find out how things work. And, that sounds like something that I think you're very blessed with the fact that you've got your hand in so many different things that has kind of really made you this really well-rounded engineer that's allowed you to just be like, right, I'll record this day. Okay, I'll produce there, I'll do that. And then, I'll do an Atmos mix. You know what I mean? It's like quite blessed that you've been able to do that. And I think that that's maybe something that I see less of these days where people are like in a very set lane. It's like, no, I just want to make beats. No, I just want to be a producer. But I'm like, check around the industry, the more versed you are and the more hands you've got in different pots, you know what I mean, the more work that you're going to get. And is that something that you found that by having that kind of, that kind of almost jack of all trades ethos, that's actually helped you massively, like in your career?
There's benefits to diversity. There's a benefit to diversity. Like you're not relying on one particular person. You're spreading your bets essentially.
Yeah.
But you're also then spreading your bets on success in that field, essentially. Like if you're not doing something all day, every day, you're not kind of being recognized for being the person to do that. You probably struggle to be recognized in a wider sense than the people you already know. Like it'll be difficult to broaden your circle.
Yeah, you're diluting
rapidly.
your reputation, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Because you've got people that just wouldn't dream of getting me to mix anything. I'm perfectly happy to phone me and go, can you record, please come and have a lovely time with us recording this thing. Like, and there's no, that's not offensive to me. Like, it's just they know me for a certain thing, and that's the job that I do for them. I think if you're looking to be like super, 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 super successful and have like a big career with a big impact, then you probably do need to like go all in on something. But maybe the start of it is very broad when you work out what people actually want to pay you to do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or what you're good at, or what you enjoy. Like, maybe you start off doing anything that people will let you do, and then you go, actually, I've done a bit of recording, bit stressful, too many people about. I like to just be in my room on my own, making my mistakes on my own. Possibly the risk of specializing is that there's also pigeonholing, where if you're doing a certain type of music or a certain type of job that is not hot anymore, like if you were like the world's best Pro Tools operator, like freelance Pro Tools operator in 1999 or 2001 or something, and then they were like, oh, actually, you're not really an engineer and you're not really a producer. Everyone does Pro Tools now. So there's no work for you anymore.
Yeah.
Or you've got to now change. Or if you're successful for doing a particular kind of music, because you've gone all in on doing donk or whatever it is for, you're 5 years into a successful donk career, and then someone in Doncaster just goes, we don't like this anymore. Like, where are you? Like,
what is donk? Have I missed something? Is that a style of music?
I don't know. I think it's an incredibly dated musical reference.
I hope it is, and I hope you've coined it first.
Yeah, if you go all in on something and that doesn't work out, or that suddenly stops being something that people are interested in, then maybe you kind of have a tough time for a bit. I don't know. But whereas diversity gives you stability, because you're like, oh, people aren't into that, so I just do the other thing now. I just do other stuff for other people. Like, and if you can be happy doing all those things.
So with all that in mind, what piece of advice would you give young engineers trying to break into the scene and make it professionally?
I think you just got to do it. You just got to be doing music. That is as simple as that. Studios still exist. Like the route that I took, I was like an intern work experience, then eventually turned into an assistant, freelance assistant,
Where
and then
did you do
in-house
that?
assistant. And so I actually started with Jay. Jay was Hugh Padgham's engineer, like 80s super producer, Hugh Padgham. And then I met Jay and Hugh, and so I'd just come and, like, I was living up north where I'm from, and I'd come and sleep in a hostel for a week and just sit on the sofa and watch the sessions happen. And then eventually got into doing recalls, and like recalls were when, like, back in the day when you're using like gear for mixing and consoles, like you just get a pad and a pen and you draw the settings and write down what was plugged into where and where it was going. And Yeah, so that still exists. Like there are still studios out there. There are still assistants in studios getting picked up by, big producers or, other engineers or whatever, and that being the springboard into doing great big projects. Like that's still a thing. If you have a way into that feels a bit more predictable than, just you can't. I think you can't do it very passively. You can't sit and like write letters or emails and hope that someone I think you got to kind of get in front of people and be a real face and a real person, like in a tactful and well strategized way. But yeah, that's the thing. If you've got the energy and you've got, unfortunately, like the funding or the way to do that, like if you live in London and you live with your family, like, and you can just go to a studio and not worry about getting paid, then unfortunately that is, the state of a lot of industries, or definitely a lot of creative industries. Or get a microphone, or don't get a microphone, make beats or mix something, like, as you two know, like there are multi-tracks that you can mix, that you can do loads of online learning, and you can just get on with it. Just like I said, I was working with people in a well-specified, expensive studio on, somewhat proper projects, and you'd have people coming in that weren't really great engineers being the engineer. Like, should be one of those people. Start there. Like, all you've got to do is meet, like, it sounds simple and stupid, but like, all you've got to do is meet someone that trusts you. And then hopefully not let them down at the end of it. Like, you've got to meet a band who are like, oh yeah, cool, we'll just let you record their thing. Like, and whether you do it in, whether you spend loads of money on some fancy equipment and you do it all properly, or whether you get one thing and you go, well, this is my version of what this would sound like. This is my sound at this point in time. Like I've got this cheap mic and I just fiddle a lot and I do lots of creative things, and something mad comes out, like, or something good comes out, great. Or you program everything and you do the vocals, or, depends what kind of music you want to do, depends what, but I would say just work out a way to just start doing it.
Okay.
Just start doing it, because literally what I've learned is that literally anyone can do it. I mean, like, in terms of the skill set that you have, not necessarily the opportunities that anyone
can gain the skills to do it.
You can gain the skills, and you can probably bluff your way through not having the skills if you meet the right people and you don't mess it all up all the time.
So, one last question. Now, we've spoken about this in person before in your very studio. You were fortunate to work with Bob Clearmountain for a couple of weeks. Yeah. Please tell everyone, what was that like, and what is his magic genius? Because he's one of my favourite all-time mix engineers, and he's one of the only mix engineers, I think, from his era whose mixes still stand the test of time.
They translate,
on all systems.
Yeah. The thing, firstly, Bob, one of the absolute nicest people you would ever meet, you would ever work with. Like, he has every right to be, the big, thinking he's the big deal and treating everyone like crap and just being the self-important, like, I'm a big shot mixer, I'm Bob Clearmountain. Like, he's got every right to do that, or you wouldn't be surprised if someone of that stature was like that. He is the absolute opposite of that. And if I'd said, like, oh yeah, I've worked with some people that are dicks and like I put up with them, like, Bob is not that guy. Like, he is so unbelievably nice, and that his modesty in his own skills. Like, because I used to publish a magazine, or I used to publish the European edition of a recording magazine called Tape Op from America, like a long time ago. And so I interviewed him for the magazine while I was working with him. Like, he mixed a Bryan Ferry record that I worked on, and then so I assisted him when he was mixing it. And I like asked him some questions for the interview, like throughout working with him. And like, he would be like, oh, do you think this sounds all right? Like, oh, I think this sounds good. Like, I think I sound, And everyone was asking me exactly what you've just asked me. What is the Bob Clearmountain magic secret? There isn't one. There's not anything that he did on that thing. And I even said to him, I was like, people are asking me, what are you doing? What is the Bob secret? And you're barely doing anything. What is it? And he was like, yeah, I just do like what needs doing. Like we were mixing this Bryan Ferry record. It was well recorded, but these were not like you push up the faders and it's all the finished record. And all Bob did was, turn on the SSL compressor and you're laughing. Like, I mean, it was a luxurious production in that it'd be like, oh, we've got Flea playing the bass on the verses. We've got Guy Pratt playing the bass on the choruses. We've got Andy Newmark playing the drums in the verse. We've got, someone else playing the drums in the, in other bits. It was like, it was a very detailed, deliberate production, but it meant that there was a lot of balance. Like there were you would press play on the song at the beginning of the day and Bob would be like, whew, this, we're going to have to mix this. And you look at, and then you'd get, so he'd start probably, we prep the song or whatever, you get all your outputs set and you label some stuff, you write up the, masking tape or whatever. Probably start that at 11 and then at 12 he's properly started mixing. And at 6 p.m, Bryan's coming in to like do the final tweaks on the song. And it's a complete transformation and it sounds incredible. And I'm doing the recall and I'm like, he's not really doing anything. Like, he's just found this, like, magical... he's not riding everything, like, there's the... he's using the SSL computer, like, he is using automation, but he's not, like, riding everything within an inch of its life. He was like, there'd be some high-pass filters on a few channels. He'd have, like, a distressor on the snare or 33609 or whatever. He'd have, like, an LA2A on the bass. He had a couple of sends that he always had, like he had like an Altiverb impulse of his chamber at his studio, had that as a reverb, and he had like a widening thing and like a delay or another reverb or whatever. And that's pretty much every song. Like he does like a little de-essing trick on 2 channels of the SSL for the lead vocal, and he'd set that up he'd have that set up and he'd just kind of find this magical spot where it all sounded really good. And he was just so... I mean, he said to me, like, he brought in his own... He had, like, Dynaudio BM15s that we rented in because that was what he was using at the time. And he was like, oh, anytime you want, just change the speakers. Like, if you're just interested in what it sounds like on the NS10s that are, like, that he'd put next to each other on the top of the tape machine, or, we had these little tiny speakers or the big main speakers. He was like, oh, if you want to just swap them out, just anything. Because he was like, sometimes I just kind of get a little bit that'll like unsettle me and it'll make me think about what it actually sounds like, or I'll hear it in a different way and I'll go, oh, all right, I didn't do that because I'm not a maniac. But he, the fact that he was like, so chilled about everything was just like really, really surprising. And yeah, so there was no secret, there was no magic. There was just like, he did, there'd be like a little bit of top end on a few things, like a little bit of...
So basically just his taste.
Yeah, it's just his taste and his balance, and just, he was like, I reckon this is a good way for this song to sit, and he was just right about it, I guess. Like, or
was it a case of watching him work, you could just feel the experience oozing out of him? Because there's some musicians I've worked with who you've got great musicians and then you've got great musicians, and the difference is usually 25 years of experience, and that's it.
He was not, like, he wasn't overtly confident about, like, yeah, we're doing he wasn't like one of the unmentioned personality mixers who were like, oh, this is what he just got on with it. We just got in, we had, I'd go and get him lunch, we'd have lunch, and then he's just getting on with the mixing. Like, and he's not at any point thinking, oh God, this, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. But he's also not like, yeah, this is sounding sweet, like cranking it up, like, this sounds phenomenal. He just quietly got on with it. And like, unbelievable
What an
talent,
enviable
obviously.
experience that
And
was.
it was really good, but also depressing because there wasn't like a magic thing that I could then take forward to be like, oh, it's fine. All you got to do, you set the SSL compressor like this, and then it's all popping. That wasn't the thing.
All right.
Unfortunately.
Well, on that clear bombshell, see what I did there?
That was terrible.
It's been emotional. It's been another great episode. Thank you so much, Al, for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Please comment below, and if you can do us a big favor and leave us an Apple review, I'll leave a link in the description, and just give us your thoughts, give us your feedback, give us 5 stars, and that will help us promote the podcast so we can get this quality information further and broader afield. Thanks for watching.